What is going on, everyone? Chris with Journals, Comics, and Pop Culture. Today, I am going to be focused on this Go Collect article that was published just a few weeks ago, going over 12 first appearances that every comic book investor should own. I am going to talk about why I think this article is extremely problematic. But before we get into it, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Check out all the links in the description below. And before we get into it, please, if you would allow me to take less than 60 seconds to give a big shout out to today's sponsor, SpiderDudeComics.com. Today's video was sponsored by my good friends over at Spider Dude Comics. You can check out their links in the description below. You guys can save 10% off of any order by using the code JOURNOS10. This code never expires. And also, if they have any other promotions going on their website, you can always piggyback the JOURNOS10 to get that extra 10% off as well. You can search by Marvel or DC or certain ages like Silver to Golden, or your favorite characters like mine, Spider-Man. You guys can see a little bit of what they got going on here. Again, Silver Age to modern books. Stuff is extremely well priced. If you know me by now, you know that I only push those that I truly support and that I truly believe in. So again, guys, go check out SpiderDudeComics.com. You can also follow them on Instagram, and you can check out their YouTube channel by finding their link in the description below or finding their YouTube link on their website. All right, everyone, let's get into this. I haven't talked much about investing in comics in a good while on my channel, and of course, we are in a very tough market right now, and I think the conversation around investing in comics right now, or literally investing in anything right now in this with the state of the economy, is a controversial issue. It's a very anxiety-driven issue, I think, for many people. I see more and more people selling off their collections online, just dumping everything they have. But then you have people that talk about it's a buyer's market, buy, buy, buy. So I think we're going to dive into this article and really look at, for one, is it really a good time to invest in anything? And what is this author here bringing to the table when presenting these 12 comic books that in this market, in this economy, this author is stating that every comic book investor should own? And what does that really mean? Now, the author here, Joseph Overaitis, I'm sure I'm butchering his name. I actually had a conversation with him in a Facebook group back and forth, and it was a productive one. I told him that I disagree with some of the stuff that he presented in the article, but he works in some type of real estate finance, and he's a very knowledgeable guy. But let's just go into these books. Actually, before we go into the books, I'm going to go all the way down. I'm going to go all the way down to his summary or the conclusion. And I'm going to read this before I actually go over the books. And then we're going to come back to this at the end of the video. He states, investment quality books have largely been what characters have appeared on film or television. I disagree with this statement 100%. And we're going to come back to this. The problem is that prices rise on these books once those treatments are announced. That's true, of course. The key to finding value is being ahead of the curve and evaluating books that have ignored potential. I do agree with him with these last couple of sentences, but perspective and context absolutely matters. And he goes on to say, the previously mentioned books have that type of potential even if they never appear in film or on a TV show. The reason they are ignored is because the attention of investors and collectors alike is elsewhere, or there is a perceived defect with where that first appearance occurs. And I think what he's saying is maybe in a title that isn't like a legacy title, it's in a C-list character title, or a crossover that isn't very popular, etc. That is a faulty way of thinking. Be bold and give these books a try. Now, there's some fact, I believe, in what he's saying in this here too, but I think this is extremely a negligent, excuse me guys, this statement right here is extremely negligent, and I'm going to come back to that after we go over some of these books. So let's just get right into it. Let's go to the top of the list. So first off, he has Conan the Barbarian #1, and he says, please explain to me how a 9.0 CGC copy is selling for less than $1,000 at the time of this article is being composed. the creator, Robert Howard, created this character almost 100 years ago. It's a safe bet that this character will be featured in film or television series, that it's eventually going to happen. I mean, it's happened in the past. I'm sure it's going to happen again. The only reason this mega hero's first appearance is not priced as it should be is because he has more appeal in movies than in traditional comic book fare. And I'm going to tell you guys right now, the one thing that I feel that is extremely detrimental with this article and with the books that this author presents is that it's very much based in his own opinion without actually statistical fact. And he uses a sensationalized rhetoric like this. The only reason that this book isn't priced as it should be. What are we correlating this book to state that it's not priced as it should be? Is there another character out there where we could say around this time, early 70s, 15-cent comic book of a first appearance and a 9.0 that's worth $1,000? What are we comparing it to? Now, I do believe that, the reason that this Conan, this character, doesn't get as much looked to in comic books is because, yes, we do appeal to this character more in movies and in TV shows. But again, I don't see even another film or another TV show really doing anything to this book. And we know the problems that live action spec are causing to the market, to spec books on the market. And big shout out to Swaggle who released a video just a couple of days ago talking about like we don't even care anymore. And I was actually going to do a live stream about this a couple of weeks ago. If you look at some of the new films and properties that are coming out, books still aren't moving like they used to. And we can pose the question, are we really moving away from this extreme FOMO when we get an announcement? All right, but I'm going to move to this next book, Marvel 2-in-1, number 54. The first appearance of Titania, the first Titania in Screaming Mimi, who later becomes Songbird. And he chalks this up to saying the reason this book is forgotten is because it appears in the lesser of the two Marvel duo pairing books. I disagree 100%. This book in a 9.8 is selling for, this is a 40-cent. This is a late 70s Bronze Age comic book with D-list characters. And a 9.8 is selling for $275. That's a solid bit of chunk of change. And quite honestly, I wouldn't say it has nothing to do with the fact that it was in a Marvel 2-in-1, because legacy books, of your A-list characters, even common run fillers, do go for a premium. You could see 40-cent Amazing Spider-Man books that aren't even key comic books or have first appearances. They will sell for much more than your common 40-cent Marvel 2-in-1. There's the reason behind that is because people value Amazing Spider-Man books more than they do Marvel 2-in-1. But to sit here and say that the only reason these characters are forgotten is because it's in a Marvel 2-in-1, no. The reason it's forgotten is because, quite honestly, there isn't demand for these characters. And the only thing that would drive this up is live action spec hype, like we got with Titania, but it was from the other Titania. And if we look at what this book did on the market, I guarantee you this comic book, when we got an announcement for the Titania in the She-Hulk show, even this book spiked during that time. We can't look at everything as saying everything is undervalued because nobody's paying attention. So we go back to what this individual concluded the article with. People aren't looking at this because of a defect. Well, it's a Marvel 2-in-1. These characters have been out for over 45 years. And if there is no intrinsic value already there, it's not simply because they're underutilized. I mean, we've had Songbird become a part of, be involved with Thunderbolts. There's nothing here with this book because nobody cares about these characters. And for those that watch my channel, what am I going to refer to back? I mean, that's like Simple Simon. Simple Simon is an undervalued character because it's a defect, because nobody sees what he could be utilized as. It's not how it works. Deadly Hands of Kung Fu number 22, first appearance of Jack of Hearts. People in the know understand the reason this book is ignored is because it's a magazine, because of the magazine bias that exists in the market. Okay. I understand that, yes, there could be a magazine bias if you want to put it like that, but I think that's almost that's a sensationalized rhetoric right there. I wouldn't call it a magazine bias, and try to use it as a negative or a derogative term. The fact is that people value comic books more than they do magazines. There is a larger collector base for comic books than there are magazines, and that's just a simple fact of the matter. Call it a bias if you want. Marvel has produced some quality first appearances like Star-Lord and Rocket Raccoon and White Tiger, to name a few. The irony is, unless they appear in a movie, it is rare for them to realize their true value because people hate magazines. Okay, so again, sensationalized rhetoric. I do agree with this statement right here. The irony is, unless they appear in a movie, it is rare for these magazines not to find their true value, but to increase in value. So you're telling me that Star-Lord appears in a movie and his magazine first appearance shoots up. That's its true value? No, because guess what? And I made videos about it. You guys could go check the numbers. During the COVID peak, that Marvel premiere, or what, I don't know the issue off the top of my head, the first appearance of Star-Lord, when the market was booming and peaking, that book was declining in value. There is no way that you could tell me that any comic book, even a magazine, has to see its true value because of an appearance in a live action film or TV show. That's not a true value. That doesn't correlate to a book's or a collectible's true value. But then he says it's rare for them to realize their true value because people hate magazines. That is like a conjectured, sensationalized blanket statement. There's no fact base in that. People hate magazines. That's rhetoric. People collect comic books more than they collect magazines, and they value comic books. I love magazines in a certain way. Like, there's a certain part of me that has this kind of certain love for magazines, but still, I want to put my money into comic books more than I do magazines. Oh, and then he says a 9.2 has a current fair market of $240. That kind of proves the point. That doesn't prove anything. What are you comparing this 9.2 first appearance of a character? And that's another thing. Jack of Hearts has been around for over 40 years. Who, in my almost 40 years of collecting, when have I heard anybody talk about Jack of Hearts? Never. I've never heard anybody talk about, I've never been in an LCS, I've never been online, I've never been with my friends, I never watched YouTube videos, I've never been at cons, I never heard say, oh man, that Jack of Hearts, man, I want to see Jack of Hearts in an MCU show, or I want to see Jack of Hearts in a series, I want Jack of Hearts to have their own comic book series, or that Jack of Hearts is so undervalued. Never. Never in my life. If you guys have heard that, put it in the comments, please. Next up, Supernatural Thrillers number 5. I've actually talked about this book, and I think this is one book where I actually agree with this author here. The Living Mummy first appears in this comic. Reviewing sales data, 9.4 CGC shows fair market value at around $500. Horror issues are in vogue. First appearances too. This character was also a founding member of Nick Fury's Howling Commandos. That concept has some potential in the MCU, which I agree. But more importantly, Bronze Age horror comics are just now starting to garner attention. I agree with that point 100%. And I wish that I got into Bronze Age horror, but I talked about Bronze Age horror, especially with Marvel. I think there's something there for DC too as well. But I do feel like the Bronze Age horror genre is definitely undervalued because it's been overlooked. And I think there is a lot of room for growth. So when you look at this individual's perspective coming from an investor strategy, not just comic book, but it's like an untapped market, right? An untapped investment. And I think that's where, when we go back to look at this individual's conclusion, this is where I actually agree with the author, stating that, you know, this is an untapped market where if you're looking to invest to get ahead of the curve, something is there. And I agree 100%. This book being on this list, I absolutely agree with. And especially in the downturn of the market right now, in the buyer's market, so to say, this one and other Bronze Age horror, especially Marvel, does indeed have a lot of potential. New Gods, number 1, a nice DC Jack Kirby book. Jack Kirby book with multiple first appearances. Should never be described as undervalued. This part of the DC universe has great potential, and yet a 9.6 right now is having a hard time cracking the $600 mark. If the New Gods ever appear in a movie, this book will explode. I disagree. It has better potential than the Eternals ever did. I can potentially see that. Jack Kirby's art and multiple first appearances are what have brought several fans already to this book, and that's true. Jack Kirby is always going to be Jack Kirby. I think that even with Eternals, the concept and the stories for those characters, I think could have been underutilized in the comic books. I think there was a lot of potential there. And although I think the movie missed the mark greatly, the Eternals movie, I think there's so much that they could do and that they can still do with a lot of these Eternals, the Eternals and the characters surrounding the Eternals in a Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I think the same could be said for New Gods. And we know that we had the New Gods property that was unfortunately canceled. I do believe that there is a lot of spec value that could be had for the New Gods still, even in the downturn of the market. But that's a volatile potential, because it's based specifically on live action spec. So to sit here and say that this book will explode is, again, I disagree, because we already see right now the trend of what live action spec does, even for popular characters. And I'm sorry, the New Gods, while there is untapped potential, I think, in the comic books and as well as in live action, that property would have to be an epic to be able to even explode. And that explosion is still going to be short term. I'm sorry. That explosion is going to be short term, and we're going to see the bell-shaped curve that we always see. Announcement, casting, trailer, up, 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 up. Movie drops, slow dip, 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 down, 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 down. So I disagree. And this individual is basing this specifically on live action spec. And what does that go? We go back to the conclusion where it states, you know, investment quality books have largely been characters that have appeared on film or on television. Extremely, extremely problematic. I'm going to still get to that. And the key word again here is investment. But let's move on. Our Army of War. This book has first appearances. Joe Kubert art. I'm not even going to get into this concept of creating characters. This is what I want to focus on this book. This perspective makes the reader see things in a different light. War comics are always sought after by many different hobbyists. That comment right there is taken out of context. While in a sense it's accurate, you have to add context. War comics are a niche market, and unfortunately they will never garner the same attention that the superhero genre has. And that's a fact of the matter. If you look at Silver Age war comics from DC, from Marvel, Bronze Age war comics from DC or Marvel, even with first issues or first appearances, they will never garner anything close to what their superhero counterparts from those eras and those ages take in. And that's just a simple fact of the matter. I don't see outward of these books aging out and just becoming more of a vintage collectible. I don't see any reason for these books they're not undervalued. I don't see these books to be undervalued whatsoever, unless for some reason 50 or 60 years from now, some 40, 50, whatever, some cultural phenomenon happens that speaks to war comics. And in a sense, that's not inherent to the comic books themselves. It's inherent to something, not even pop culture, but like I said, uh, relevant to, excuse me for kind of fumbling over my words here, modern day cultural relevance of real life, struggles and everything that comes along with war. That's why I think we look at these war comics as they were. I think we look at, your Captain America Golden Age comics as they were, because they speak to a cultural significance of World War II. So again, Untapped, I don't see it here. I don't see it. Moving on, Fury of Firestorm number 24. This series has rarely drawn any interest from fans, and I think that's where the author is going to say, this is untapped potential. It's the defect, because it's a series that just hasn't drawn potential. The exception is this issue because it contains an original story with the first appearance of the Blue Devil. A 9.8 can be purchased for under $150. This is even after he has already appeared in Swamp Thing television series. I think this is an irony of having this book on this list. The character's concept has legs, and yet again the potential of the character is largely ignored. Fans keep clamoring for Justice League Dark. He has already been a member of one DC Comics Magic Horror team, so why not have him migrate to another? Again, this is a question of this character being 40 plus years old. The Blue Devil run is a 50-cent bin run. There's this character, unfortunately, has never been utilized, and the fact that a D-list run with a D-list character can still get $150 and a 9.8. I mean, that to me, again, it doesn't speak to a character being undervalued. And the fact that this character has already appeared in the Swamp Thing television show, it's going to be very hard for any new interest to be brought to this character. It's going to be very, very hard. And again, if the character shows up in a Justice League Dark film, any increase in demand is going to be a live action, quick fix FOMO spec that's going to drive the book up for the short term, and then it's going to dip back down after the film's release. And 20 years from now, nobody's going to be talking about Blue Devil. Moving on. Let's see. I'm going to skip over that book here. We got independent. He gets into independent books. I think Evil Ernie is actually a decent book that's on this list. I'm not going to talk about that. Let's go to this Men in Black right here. These characters made their first comic appearance in Air Cell Comics in January of 1990. Since then, they have appeared in comics from Malibu and Marvel. The film series may have been comedic, but if ever rebooted, the TV shows could take a darker tone that could attract a new target audience. I agree there. In addition, all the talk about aliens in the news could make this a very topical book to own. All right. The fair market value for a 9.6 copy is only $350. That is not bad for a book that has less than 150 total copies in the CGC census. Okay. I do feel like there could be some untapped potential here with this book. I'm going to agree with him there. But I think, again, the data and the reasoning behind why he's got this book on this list here is kind of taken out of context. And it goes to what I've said. Just because a book has a low amount of census numbers doesn't mean that the book is scarce or undervalued or rare, etc. It simply means that nobody has cared to send these books in to get them graded. That's the simple fact of the matter. This book hasn't garnered enough attention to have more people send them to CGC. Now, It's a black cover. I don't know what the 9.8s are looking like, but there could be a little something there because of the low number. But I'm not going to put all my eggs in one basket on this book. This isn't a horrible pick, but I just be careful with the data in how you look at this book. And again, we have to stop thinking this idea, oh, it's been optioned, it's been optioned, it's been optioned. And even indies, where there is a lot of people are buying into indies right now simply because they're good stories. Since COVID, we've seen this idea of just because a comic book is optioned, we have to FOMO out and flock to it as if it's going to drive the value of that book. And it doesn't, because that value doesn't last. It doesn't hold. I'm going to skip these couple of books right here, and we're going to go right down to the conclusion again, and I'm going to sum this up. So looking back at this statement right here, where he says investment quality books have largely been what characters have appeared on film or television. This is completely false. This statement right here should say speculation quality books have largely been what characters have appeared on film or television. Or it should say quick flip books have largely been what characters have appeared on film or television. Investment books are books that have staying power on the market. Investment books are comic books that have some sort of intrinsic value. Now, don't get me wrong, because every good investment isn't a blue chip key. You can't look at every investment and say, oh, well, it's not worth much right now. That means it's not a good investment because it's not going to be worth much in the future. That's not what I'm saying. But you have to take in many more elements to determine if a potential book can be that. And that's why the one book that I agreed with them was the Living Mummy, supernatural thrillers. This has a lot of intrinsic properties to it that we can sit and pick apart and say, these are why this book can have more value in the future and why it's a bit undervalued right now. I think the majority of everything he said was either really based on the fact that this character hasn't shown up in a movie yet, or people hate magazines, or it's a B-list title, and that means we should care more about it. No, they're D-list characters. We have to really be careful how we talk about investments. And I think the one thing that I've realized over the last few years going through COVID and everything is this. I do believe that the comic book market has a lot of potential to grow outside of your legacy characters' first appearance in key books. I've said it a lot on my channel. More and more people are getting down with origins. More and more people are going after second appearances. Even like crossovers or solo series. And I still believe that all of these types of key books are going to have future potential for the right characters, right? Because as the big books, the big first appearances, the first number ones continue to grow in value, your average collectors are going to demand what's next in line that they can either afford or collect themselves. That is going to stay at play in the comic book hobby and community for many years. But what I think we have understood is that during COVID, when everyone was home, bored, sitting in front of their screens, and being inundated with all this information surrounding comic books, and we were buying everything from anytime some random person showed up in a show, we saw somebody's left pinky in a show, and we're exploding White Vision's first appearance from a $100 book to a $1,500 book, literally in a matter of a few hours, to now seeing that book is about at the price it was before. We saw him in WandaVision. We saw a 50-cent bin Frogman first appearance jump up to a $40 book. That is jump right back down to a dollar bin book, 50-cent bin book. We got to realize that just because a book hasn't had value in the past, and just because a character hasn't been utilized in a TV show or in a movie, it does not mean that there is future value there. We have to be very, very careful. And I think those books are far and few between. And quite honestly, even if you want to look at live action, Marvel is going to a lot of these newer characters that have been introduced in the last 20 to 30 years, rather than going back and doing a TV show or a movie featuring screaming Mimi. I don't know. Now again, we have a Thunderbolts coming out, who knows. But the bottom line where I think this article falls flat is that there's not a lot. He's not comparing. This book is in a 9.6, is selling for this much, and there's no reason why it should. Give us a reason why you think it should be more. What's a comparative book from that time, from that genre? And then to really, I think, use verbiage that will make the reader think that investment quality books, and he does say, don't get me wrong, he does say that you have to be before the curve. And I've already said that. Yeah, if you're waiting for a trailer to drop or announcement to drop and you're FOMOing out buying those books, you're not a speculator. You're late to the party, and all the speculators that are flipping books are making their money off of you and your FOMO. So yeah, the key to finding value is being the head of the curve in any market that you're looking for. But the problem is that this whole list, for the most part, is based so much in stating that you got to be ahead of the curve of books with characters that have potential in TV and film. So, and then again, he does say it's not just that, it's collectors where they see a perceived defect. People hate magazines. It's not a defect. It's just the fact that the market for magazines isn't as big as the market for comics. It's a defect that these characters are ignored just because they're in a side title that's not a legacy title. No, it's because nobody really cared about these characters in the first place. So with that being said, guys, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. And again, if you aren't subscribed to the channel, please take some time to do so. Be well, and until next time.